Hey y'all, how's it going? Welcome back. It's Mia, and today we are discussing Andor episode 12, the season 1 finale of Star Wars Andor, if that wasn't clear already. Guess what? I very much do think I did enjoy this finale. The first word that comes to mind is beautiful. I don't know why, it was just, I think specifically the funeral scene, how that all came together. As we said last time, we knew that everything was going to culminate on Ferrix, and you remember I said, I was like, I don't like Ferrix as a set. It's drab, it's gray, it's, uninspiring, but, so I had a couple of reservations about that, but in the end, I do think that they pulled it off quite well, and I think one of my favorite parts was seeing how they had the marching bands come, marching kind of, from every side of the street. And it was it was like the direction. I don't know, you usually don't talk about directing, but you could kind of see how, maybe they were instructed to play, obviously, slow and walk kind of somberly, but also have this kind of determination and grit. So, I don't know, it was just a nice touch on top of the fact that they played kind of that medley that we've been hearing throughout the series. I was like, oh, that's really kind of neat. So I'm like, honestly, I might have to say, because of how well this was crafted, maybe this is one of the best scenes in Star Wars history. I know that's a lot, but I think because, of course, this is kind of off the back of Rogue One. It's barring a lot of that tone, barring a lot of all those familiar elements. And so, obviously a lot of people are like, yeah, Rogue One is like the best Star Wars movie of them all. And so I think that is what has made Andor so unique as well, and why I can kind of give that scene, this grand title. So let's move into it. Let's first get to talking about Andor, who, I don't know, as I was, writing this out, I was like, he had things to do, but I think I had some problems with how he got by with it. Now, of course, like I said, I was like, well, it'd be kind of dumb of him to go on Ferrix if he knows that everyone is headhunting for him and, hoping for him to be on that planet, because yeah, it's a huge risk for him to go. And it seemed like his intention was obviously just to kind of be there, be present for the funeral, or at least kind of be in the shadows. And then that kind of transformed into him going on this mission to rescue Bix and, basically get her to safety. But yeah, where I think that his piece of the story has some holes in it, it was like, it to me felt like our protagonist didn't really wasn't the most interesting part of the story. And that's usually what a finale is about. Like, okay, this is all culminated up to this one point in this person's journey, and it just kind of felt very easy for him to get by. Like I said, I was worried. Being on Ferrix, he's got, at least 3 kind of groups of people looking after him or trying to catch him, right? Daedra and the ISB, who she was just, she was looking all over for him, no rug left unturned. And then, of course, we had Luthen, who would come to basically kill him. And I don't know, maybe hoping that from his one vantage point, he would find Andor. And then, of course, we had Syril and his companion as well, who they just really kind of stood around too and were just maybe hoping they would find him by coincidence. So I don't know, I'm like, maybe that's just a testament to how great Cassian is at stealth, but it feels like there was no real escalated risk of conflict with Cassian just kind of making his way through Ferrix. I think he maybe should have been forced with a little more pressure, a little more confrontation with one of those main 3 groups of people that were trying to catch him, because otherwise it was just kind of like, well, what was the point? So yeah, that takes me back to my original or earlier point that I was making. It was like the funeral scene really was just the big moment in this finale. Kind of, not really anything that Andor did. But I will say, sure, maybe that, it was an interesting way to frame this narrative. And especially like once the brawl breaks out after the kid throws the bomb, and then it's just all out chaos. And yeah, it just adds to this feeling of the realness that I've been talking about this entire time. Talking about at first, it was like the sacrifices on an individual level that these characters have to make, like Mon and like Luthen. And then this one in particular with this scene is seeing, again, we're talking about typically these big rebel battles and they're in space and shooting lasers. But this one was, boots on the ground, but not even that. You know, these were just everyday at-home folks who were tired of what was going on, who were tired of taking crap from the Empire. So I think that was an interesting way to frame that, because I'm like, wow, how often do we really see these like little moments, I guess, where you've got these people fighting back against the oppression of the Empire? You know, they're not just official rebels. So that was awesome. And of course, Marva's speech as well, seeing her blown up and giving them the type of ammo that they needed to fight back. So that, yes, that was really well done. So let's move on to Luthen, one of my favorite characters to talk about in this whole thing. And one thing that took me aback, and maybe it's surprising that I missed this or something, or that I didn't really think he was going to go there, but I really did not think that it was his intention to kill Andor. Now, I know he had been saying, you know, Andor is a threat, and, you know, he knows too much, basically, right? But at least when it crossed my mind, I thought that Luthen was trying to at least keep Andor on his side, maybe in the same way that he was doing with the spy that he has within the Empire, because now it's kind of like Luthen can use, Andor's very useful alive, but he can use Cass to, you know, be like, hey, you know all this stuff and I've got all this stuff on you, so I can't really let you out of this game, or else I think at that point he could threaten to kill him, like, you know. And I guess as we see by the end, Cass is like, well. But, you know, all that being said, I thought it was just always Luthen's original plan to just kind of keep Andor in his back pocket, always keep a watchful eye on him and be like, hey, I can use him later on. Because, like, even thinking about Daedra, when she got notified of the Krieger attack and come to find out that everyone died, even she was upset because she knew how useful at least having one person alive could be, because all that is just information. So maybe it's not a one-to-one comparison with keeping Andor alive versus, you know, all of these rebel pilots or rebel people with information. But yeah, I guess, and we'll talk more about what I think will happen between Cassian and Luthen next season in just a little bit. Now, moving on to talking about Daedra and the ISB. Wow, number one, Daedra. I mean, man, in this finale specifically, Daedra was just, wow. She's so mean. And I say that in like the best way possible, but also it's just to the point where it makes you wonder with the actress. I'm like, where are you channeling this from? This is some real rage you got going on. And I'm like, even in the span of, like, when I think about good villains, I would say, you know, I think the MCU in that regard has a lot of strong villains, talented villains, and so I'm like, I feel like she even tops a lot of them. Maybe not so much by her plans and, oh, I can relate to her like a Killmonger or something like that, but just in more so for acting, just being menacing AF. That's where she, I think, takes the cake compared to anyone else. But I suppose that's why it was pretty good poetic justice when she was in the midst of the brawl, and now all of a sudden she's getting trampled by everybody and the crowd is just pulling her to shreds. You're like, yeah, tear her up. But I was like, I know it would be too good to be true for her to actually die in that scene or be captured or compromised, because I'm like, we kind of need her. She's really important. So I was like, yeah, it's not a surprise that Syril came and saved her. At least he was useful for something. Which I guess this is a good time to talk about Syril, because it's just like every episode I have less and less respect for him, which I get is the point. But I mean, just from a character standpoint altogether, like I talked about last time, I was like, okay, in this finale, he has to, you know, I'm looking forward to seeing what he does to try and get Andor and seeing how Andor will foil his plan. But he had no plan, and there was no Cassian to fight back against his plan. So it was like there was no effort and there was no value in him even showing up at that raid besides to save Daedra. So I'm like, I'm really coming to this conclusion that there was no need for Syril after like episode 3 or 4, because, you know, every intention that he has is not really met with any sort of, well, much of anything. It would be one thing if he did try to catch Cassian Andor and Cassian Andor foils his plan and it's pathetic and it's like, oh wow, haha. But just the fact that he's kind of just always inserted in these scenes and he's looking and he's trying, but he's not doing anything, I'm like, okay, we need to boost up this character at least by next season now. And I think that maybe there's a saving grace because, like I said, he rescued Daedra from her being pulled to shreds, and maybe she owes him a life debt, so because of that, she might find some pity in him. She might give him a position in the ISB. Maybe if she's extra generous, she'll go on a date with him. I don't know, but he just needs to be doing something. Otherwise, I've had enough of Syril. I'm sorry. Well, okay, so on to Mon, who had a bit of she had some resolution to her arc this whole season. And, we find out that, number one, she does accept the marriage proposal, or goes ahead with the setting up of the arranged marriage for her daughter and the thug's son. And on top of that, we also learned that her driver is an informant for the ISB. And so we know now that the Empire is like 100% right watching Mon. And so, yeah, I feel like we've talked about the marriage proposal thing a lot in these last 2 episodes or so. So yeah, I was very surprised to see that she ended up making that decision. But yeah, it is just this big testament to seeing how far Mon specifically will go and how much she would sacrifice, rather, in order to cover her tracks in the name of the rebellion. And so in season 2, I guess we'll see if this transaction that she has made is successful. And really, like I said again in season 2, I'm kind of done with the soirees at her apartment and, these scenes with her in the car. And the apartment is a very beautiful set, but I am ready to see what her next steps are. I am ready to see, what happens when she begins to put more of that foot forward and start making more concerted efforts with the rebels, or, at what point is she really with the Rebel Alliance. So she's got a lot going for her, and I don't know, I think there's a lot that they can play with in season 2 for her character. And speaking of season 2, one other big thing to mention now that I want to circle back to Luthen and Andor, because there's so much to talk about in this finale. It's this whole end scene that we have between Andor and Luthen that I was talking about earlier, where Andor comes aboard Luthen's ship and he says this line to him. He says, "Kill me or take me in." And when he says that, all of a sudden Luthen has this kind of like wicked, sort of sinister look on his face. And I'm like, okay, he's got something in mind here. What is he thinking? And I'm wondering if it's him finally realizing how valuable it is to have Cassian Andor alive in his fight in this against the Empire. And so I'm wondering if that means, when he says, "or turn me in," does that mean Luthen thinks, or is concocting in his mind this plan to actually turn Cassian Andor into the Empire, and seeing how he can use him, from the inside. Now, technically, Cassian Andor has already been imprisoned by the Empire. He did his time in the labor camp, and so I'm sure he's kind of regretting saying that in the first place. But Luthen was not aware that he was a prisoner of the Empire. So now, if he does it his own way, he can kind of maybe in season 2 maneuver that to where he's got an eye on Cassian, and they're able to feed each other information some way, somehow. So we shall see how that ends up. I guess in season 2, they've got a lot of time to work on that. And then one last thing in general that I want to talk about with Andor is this idea of useless characters. I know where to tack this on in the review, so I'll just say it now. Seems like in this series, we had a lot of principal actors who felt like they were, a really big part of the story. They were giving a lot of attention, but they weren't given a lot to do to move the story forward. And to me, the biggest offender of that was Cinta. I would say Vel and Cinta, but at least Cinta. At least Vel was, the cousin of Mon Mothma, and so she could go between Luthen and Mon, and she had some, useful scenes talking with Mon. But Cinta in particular, it just kind of seemed like after the whole heist mission, Luthen goes and I guess assigns her to be on Ferrix, hoping that she'll catch Andor. But it's like she spent more time on Ferrix than Andor did. And even then, when he came back those 2 times, one to pick up his mother and then 2 again for the funeral, she still didn't really do anything. She wasn't useful in that regard. So it kind of seemed like just a big waste of characters, or like, they didn't really know what to do with her. Another character that I felt that with was Bix. It seemed like they really were trying to put a lot of emphasis on her, or, her being a principal character. But at the same time, after a while she gets captured and then there's nothing that she can do for the rest of the show but, look sad and lonely. And I think the one thing maybe that would have kind of redeemed her character arc is if they had more time to build up her relationship with Cass, because at the end it's this, you could have this moment where it's this princess rescue. Mario rescues the princess from the tower and you're like, oh my gosh, finally, she's back with him, they're together, they can be happy. But I don't know, maybe it's the fact that she was with that other guy in the beginning of the series, so she didn't really have time to form like a on-screen an intimate relationship with Cassian Andor. And then, he immediately leaves and he's not calling her, he's not writing to her. So there's no emotional connection between these 2 characters that kind of warranted me being happy that she got rescued. I really couldn't care one way or another. So I think that was unfortunate. And then, of course, like I said, the other character that I just can't, seems he's just kind of there is Syril, and we already talked about him. So yeah, I'm like, I hope they kind of tighten up the writing in that regard, either by, I don't know, just eliminating these characters, giving them less to do, or actually giving them things to do and making them a little more pivotal to the plot. All right, so now I can get down to my final thoughts. So I will say, yeah, what a great, interesting finale. I would say it's up there with like The Mandalorian season 2. I don't know if I can compare the 2, but this was definitely a better finale than Book of Boba Fett and Obi-Wan. And I especially like the end credits scene. If you didn't see the end credits scene, just take like 30 seconds out of your day to watch that before I talk about it. Okay. I did like that they they've revealed what they were making at the labor camp, which was these little cogs, these little connectors that, when you pan out, they're building the Death Star, and it's part of a little, little indent where the laser goes. So I thought that was a pretty cool reveal. So overall, how do I judge Andor season 1? I liked it. I really, really liked it. And I think, like I said, I still 100% stand by the fact that the first 3, maybe 4 episodes were quite slow. And yes, I do enjoy reading. And yes, I do have an attention span. Like I said, my biggest criticism was that it just felt like they didn't know where they were going with those first 3 episodes. There was very little direction. And so finally, like I said, come 5 and 6, they finally found their footing. And so I think that is going to be to their benefit in season 2. I don't think season 2 is going to start out as slow as season 1 did. Mainly because finally everyone has, for the most part, something to do. A lot of things are coming together now. And so I'm hoping they don't make that same mistake where it just takes a really long time to get somewhere and get to the point. And then I will also say, to me, this is one of the more unique projects in recent Star Wars history. I would say maybe up there with The Mandalorian and, of course, Rogue One. So I have to give them a lot of credit there. But yeah, I will miss this series. I really will miss this series. I hate that, it's going to be another 2-year gap or whatever. I want to watch another episode next week. And so that's just a testament. You see how I did a complete 180 with this series? I really, really love it, and I really want more. But otherwise, yeah, guys, let me know what you thought about Andor, the finale, all of season 1, your hopes for season 2. I want to hear it all because I think it was, like I said, it is a good show and I'm looking forward to season 2. Also, be sure to subscribe because this by far is not the end of our Star Wars coverage. Of course, up next, I believe the next big project is The Mandalorian season 3. So that will be an awesome discussion. Of course, I love discussing all the news and all the goings on with Star Wars as well in between those periods. So be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this discussion. It really helps out me a lot. And also, if you are a Marvel fan, in these next coming days, I will be reviewing the final Marvel project of 2022, which is the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special. So please stick around for that. I'm really looking forward to watching that as we approach this holiday season. So yeah, what a fun review, guys. Thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed all the conversations that we got to have. Please do stick around on this channel, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.